Greatness. 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 Wow, wow, wow. Greatness.
Yo, welcome to the Renewing the Mind podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Sanchez. Joined with me is my dad, Dr. Raul Sanchez. How you doing, Dad?
I'm feeling amazing. Like back in the day at NDSU, we had a saying, those who stay will play. Those who play will be champions. Once a champion, always a champion, baby. That you know how it goes right there. There she be.
And there's the ring kiss. Hey, on this podcast,
Yes.
we teach you how to renew your perspective, move towards uncertainty, and find what's awesome about that in every situation. And never forget it. There's 2 times to be great: when you feel like it and when you don't.
Amen.
Today,
Yes, sir.
we are hopping into University of Me. But before we get started, if you're watching the podcast on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and ring that bell so you get notified when we release new content. And if you're listening to this podcast wherever you consume the audio podcast, please leave us a review and then send it to a couple people you know. We believe what we talk about here changes lives, and we want as many lives to hear this as possible.
Yes, sir.
Sweet.
Hey, before I jump in,
go ahead.
Back over here, my buck right behind me there, we call that buck Rookie. It just got officially scored by a certified Pope and Young, Boone and Crockett scorer, and the overall official score is 185 inches and some change. But unfortunately, you need 160 inches to get into the first record book, Boone and Crockett, and it was like 159 and some change. So I was like, can I throw you some salsa? You want some deer fajitas? You know, just give a little quarter.
Did you demand a recount?
No. It wasn't. I really just have never had them officially scored.
Sure.
But enough people who comment on that or talk to me or see me, they'd be like, dude, what's the score? What's the score? Have you got it scored yet? Isn't it killing you to get it scored?
Right.
And I just, I was like, I've never actually done that with any of the deer that we have. But anyways, I thought it was really cool. The whole deduction thing, that's a whole nother podcast. I was just driving home tonight thinking we could do a podcast just on that. Like we'll have to put that on 12-2 or something, because it's really cool. Like, okay, this is the brow tines that stick up, eye guards, like above the eyes. If one is really big and the other one's different, small, they can't take the bigger one. They have to take the smaller one. So essentially you get the score of the smaller one twice. So the whole system is set up to make sure that that's it's a conservative score on a symmetrical buck. So, I think, I don't know the number, maybe 16 inches or something, 15 inches, I think 15 something of what they call the non-typical points, so 15 inches didn't count. Which is kind of interesting, but that's okay. It's just a really cool experience for me. So that was what I did today after work.
And, it's crazy is from one bow hunter to another, what I'm saying? We got to put an asterisk by that deer, you know what I'm saying? Because, it wasn't, you got illegal, like, you use the rifle. So
you act like I poached it in the dark with a flashlight.
So, I mean, you know what I'm saying? As a bow hunter, it's
Right. I took my man Tony out, and we shot that thing like within 11 minutes of like hopping out of the truck. It was just crazy. But the cool thing is, like, I just opened up a new repertoire for that. Just so we gun hunt with that. So we'll do that again for a couple of weeks. But anyway, that's a fun fact.
Sweet. Well, let's hop into this. University of Me. Our goal is 30 minutes starting now.
All right. So university. So basically let's just talk about like just the concept, University of Me. Obviously you understand university is like a place where you go to learn, you get instruction, and then a place for examination. So I'm going to get instructed and then I'm going to examine myself, right? It's simple. So I'm going to get some data. I have to learn the data, then take a test on the data. So you understand the concept of university. Okay. Yep. Concept of me. I'm a speaker. I am who I am, but then I have to look back at me. So we talk about this all the time on the podcast about being congruent. Imagine if everything I teach you, I did none of it. So I'd be incongruent as a coach or mentor. Okay. And to me, that's blasphemous stuff. And, having alcoholic father figures, they always told me what to do and never did it. So it just pushed me away. It literally became like a parent alienation thing where I alienated myself from them because just didn't want any of it. I'm like, you're a freaking liar. So why would I do anything you tell me to do? Okay. So the ability to learn info, download the data mentally, and then self-examine yourself. We talk about this all the time about having self-awareness. So like this thing came out. It's really like, I keep a running tab of like topics, and Tyler and I bounce it back and forth. But I've just had so many people literally recently continue to say to me, how come I can't speak up for myself? Why is it that I know what I want to say, but I just, at the moment, I kind of choke up and I don't say it? Why does it take me 5 days, 11 days, 2 weeks to ponder what just happened? And then finally I have 17 answers. And we laugh about this as a family, because my wife tends to be shy in big groups. So she won't speak up. And then she comes home and she's like, you know what I should have said to that lady? I should have said this. And next time and she'll roll up her sleeves and she'll go into role play mode, and we all start laughing. Right. We're like, yeah, mama, get him. What would you say? Get him. We start getting her all hyped up. And it's an everyday common thing.
Or she'll tell you what to hear. This is what you need to say. Yes. Like, Mom, you would never, ever, ever say that. Yes. Well, I know, but I'm saying that would be something you should say.
Yes, correct. So here's what I want you to think about. I'm going to download information for the purpose of learning. And then I have to test myself, examine myself, put a challenge on me, enter me into a challenge to examine myself. And then I have to circle back and look at where I thought I'd be compared to where I'm at. And then I have to learn that information. That's called the gap, right? Where I thought I'd be to the reality. Now, what do I do about that gap? I grow. So that's the whole purpose we're going to do today. Okay. All right. So let me ask the question again. So why is it that I know what to say, but in a group scenario, or when one person confronts me, I don't speak up? Why do I not say anything to protect myself, or to put myself forward, or to at least gain something? Why do I allow myself to be stepped on? Okay. The number one answer, I want just 3 answers for you. The first one is, number one, you're not alone. So take a guess of the number. Anyone who's here, just give me a number. What do you think? What's the percentage of people who say, I knew that I should have said something, but I didn't? Out of 100%, how many people say that they struggle with this? Ty, take a guess.
Yeah, I'll take a little bit for the comments to come in, but I'll probably say 80%.
Okay, that's a good guess. 72.
Oh.
So out of a group of 100 people, let's say a mastermind, right? If 100 people have a question, right, 72% of them are not going to raise their hand.
Yeah.
So now think about this: in a mastermind, in a group meeting, and a church board meeting, something like that, staff, if you have almost 3/4 of your people not participating, you're a small organization and you alienate 3/4 of your people. Yeah. That's nuts. Now, here's what's also pretty crazy. Out of that 72%, when they get evaluated and they say, yeah, I should have said something, but I didn't stick up for myself. Okay. Then they say this: how long did you ponder that scenario? How long did you replay that error, or failure is what they call it? How long did you replay that failure in your head? And the answer was 40% of them said it stuck with them for 2 weeks, 14 days. Easily. 14 days, they're pondering that decision. They're driving, they're just making coffee. They're thinking, dang, I should have said this. Like, man, why can't I? Like, what's wrong with me? And then they beat themselves up. Okay. And here's what I want you to hear. This is the why that gets you stuck. Negative reinforcement is this. Positive reinforcement is I gain something. Like if I give you $1, it's positive reinforcement. Okay. Negative reinforcement is I take something painful away from you. Like, hey, you know what? I love you. I'm going to mow for you. So you have a relief. Okay. Yep. So what happens is I make a decision not to say anything. I ponder that failure for 2 weeks. I eat myself up. I beat myself up. I'm negative with my self-talk. And then the next time that opportunity shows up, I choose not to say anything. In the moment, there's a relief. Like, yes, I don't have to eat that pain right now. And then I suffer again for 2 weeks. And it's that suffering mentally that allows me not to do it again. Right. So I am negatively reinforced to not say anything again. And so the cycle continues. Okay. Yeah. All right. So number one, you're not alone. 72% of the people are in your shoes. Number two, this is pretty cool, but cognitive psychology simply says the issue is it's easier to go with what we call groupthink. If 4 people start saying, hey, this is what we think, and there's 12 people who say no, everybody is just quiet because the 4 people are a group, and there's this concept called groupthink. So we're more likely just to go with what the group says. Okay. And so the reason why we don't speak up is this issue called social threat. Okay. So social threat prevents me from speaking up. And so social threat works like this. I think, oh, I should say something, but then I'll say, And I'll use my daughter's terms. Sometimes she had a negative term for a group of girls who were bullying her, and she would just say the brat pack. Okay. So what happens to people at work or in business or at church or in a social group will say, the brat pack are just going to attack me anyways.
Sure.
It's not going to work. They already ignore
Most
me.
vocal people.
Yeah. The most vocal people, the loud, cheerful people, whatever you want to say, the popular group, the athlete group, the jocks, whatever you want to term. Okay. They are just going to pick on me more.
Yep.
So they will just ignore me again. They will just reject me or leave me out again. So there's this social threat that becomes personally harmful to me. So now what happens when you're threatened, right? Your hands get sweaty. You might get sweat on your brow. You start to breathe a little bit heavy. And then instantly the blood flow leaves your forehead, which is where we have higher order processing or the ability to sequentially think, like first, second, third, fourth. And then when I can't do that, I start to be really, really sensitive to my sensory input. So like, man, it's hot in here. Like, man, I'm thirsty. Like, why do I feel so panicked right now? Like, I'm gonna have to go to the bathroom. And then so I get up and I leave that situation. And then again, the negative reinforcement shows up. So now I feel relief because I left the scenario. But again, I'm not growing, right? So if we take a look at this, it's like I'm taking all that data in, but I'm just not showing up to test, then I never know where I'm at. I never know where I stand. I'm gonna have to continue to take this class over and over and over, because how many times do you audit a class before you actually have to get graded?
Right.
Makes sense. So at some point you got to speak up and you got to attack that threat. Now, we always talk about moving toward uncertainty. And when the social threat isn't a big group, the second thing that becomes a social threat is what they termed random responses. We would call that uncertainty. So for example, if Stella has to come tell Utah, like, hey, daddy, I did this, she has a pretty good idea of like one or two types of ways you're going to approach it. If I have to go tell a principal I don't know, or if I have to speak up in front of a coach and challenge a coach or challenge a teacher or challenge my boss, especially initially, I have no idea how, she's going to take it. So then what happens is I get inside my head. I have these scenarios. Okay. And those uncertain scenarios put me at a disadvantage. And then it triggers our number 3. So our number 3 issue is ants. And we've talked about ants before, right? Automatic negative thoughts. Dr. Daniel Amen, world-renowned psychiatrist, he tests and does 3D SPECT scans on the brain to understand what area is underfunctioning or overfunctioning, and then medicates or supplements or therapies based on the area of the brain that's affected. So the ants, automatic negative thoughts, are things like mind reading, which is like, I know Tyler's just going to think I'm stupid. Okay. Fortune telling, this isn't going to work. It's absolutely going to backfire. Okay. This will just be stupid. I'm just going to get humiliated. So I'm predicting the future. Okay. And then another one is selective abstraction, where even if there was a time when I did it and it was positive, all I remember are the negative ones. So right away, my head plays the 3 times I failed by not saying anything. And so I just like, well, I always suck at this. Okay. So those are the ants. And those are actually sparked by the threat of, the anxious threat that this is going to go wrong.
Yep.
Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Back to that group think. During the summer, I was doing some research on like best practices for classrooms and teachers. And one of the things I stumbled across was this thing called an attendance bracket. And so instead of going through, like Raul here, Stacy here, Alicia here, present, you put basically you create a bracket like a tournament, and it could be over multiple things. So the first one we did was restaurants. And so instead of saying here, I have Qdoba versus Chipotle. So I say Raul in the Chipotle, Tyler Qdoba, Stacy Qdoba, and you pick which restaurant. So a couple things that does is, number one, it adds a little bit of fun. So you're not just saying here or present or, alive or something stupid that middle schools think of, but it gets them to voice their opinion. And she writes it as like a pathway mentality that, one person says one path, down the path, Qdoba. So next person, it's easier to say Qdoba because it's already been said, Qdoba down the path. And it takes one person to go Chipotle, and then you can watch it in the room. It'll go Qdoba, Chipotle, Qdoba. It's like, and so after doing this for a while, I had the class, I talked to them about it, and we went through the reasons why, kids said, well, I would rather have voted Chipotle, but I heard majority of people say Qdoba, or vice versa, or Chick-fil-A, whatever it is. And I think it goes to that. I think you see that in 6th grade, it's 7th, 8th grade. And I think you also see that as adults. Well, I don't want to be the one person that says something that no one else is thinking. And in reality, there's multiple people thinking that exact same thing. Just you don't want to be the one person to start the path down that, other people will follow, but it's like that unknown comes into it. And so we're trying to get them in middle school to say, dude, if you like the restaurant over the other one, don't do it just because everyone else does. That's a stupid thing to do. But I think we still do that as adults as well.
Correct. And two cool things that happen. Number one, people are starting to express themselves. So the research is really, really strong on the people who just express opinions in general. If you get them talking, like sales professionals, they say, if they can get you to say yes 10 times before they like pitch you, you're more likely to say yes, right? That's pretty obvious. And so getting people just to talk and express their opinion, whether it's Chipotle or Qdoba, and then you have some random person who will say Taco Bell, everybody starts laughing. But like the concept of just expressing themselves is one thing that helps people to feel, and what we're going to learn in a second, called psychological safety. Like I feel safe by explaining that.
Exactly why I do it.
Yeah. And then the second piece is, which really cool, is you help people identify what they call like minds, right? So if somebody would say Qdoba and I like Qdoba way better than Chipotle, I'm like, yeah, dude, beast, Chipotle, you're right. Yeah. And then, so now we have a connection. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It happened. We did Outback or Texas Roadhouse, and it was, like it was kind of heavy Outback. And then one kid was like, have you guys had the butter at Texas Roadhouse? And then everyone was like, oh yeah, the butter. And then it was like Texas Roadhouse the whole rest of the way.
Yeah.
It's like everyone rallied behind the one thing.
Yeah, that's correct. And just getting people to say stuff that way, just really quick, small pieces, is the best way to make them feel safe in your classroom. And then they're more likely to say bigger things, when you have a bigger discussion.
Yep.
So if you take a look at that, okay, number one, you're not alone. Number two, cognitive psychology says you're facing a social threat. And that's why you can't speak. So a lot of times I hear people say this when they'll ask me clinically, and I'll say, okay, why do you think you can't speak up? Or why do you think you're stuck? And they really are looking for deep stuff. Like, maybe I'm just messed up. Like, I don't know. Like, do you think I'm broken? And again, they're looking at deep, deep stuff. And I just say, maybe it's just deconditioning. What do you mean? Maybe you just haven't practiced in a while. I mean, what would it look like if you started practicing?
Yep.
Right. And as we transition into what I want you to do or what you need to do, think about this. What's the fastest way to break an addiction? What's your guess, Ty?
Start something new.
Bam. Start something new. Everybody tries to quit smoking by just quitting smoking, or, stop cursing by just stop cursing, or like, how do I just speak up? I've never known. I just can't. And they just, so what happens is you start a new habit that makes you talk. As you start a new habit that makes you talk, you're more likely to talk in another scenario. So you could go to coffee more often. You can do, and we'll talk about some of those things. But the number one hurdle, so I gave you the 3 top ones, but the number one hurdle I hear is people think they're broken. And people will say things like, do you think it was my childhood? Do you think it's being the baby of the family? Do you think it's because, everybody would always call me the runt? Like I've always been the runt of the family. Like maybe I just don't feel powerful, or maybe I don't feel worth it. Maybe I'm not worth it. Maybe
there's like a deeper issue.
Yeah. And the real issue, the honest issue, is they just don't practice. And so once they don't do it, then they beat themselves up. Then they carry that for 2 weeks. And the next time they feel so much anxiety that they really quickly say, I'm not going to say anything. And then they take the instant relief versus that temporary pain and then the long-term gain, right? Yep. So they instant right away, 3, 2, 1, go. Oh, I'm not saying anything. And then instant relief, like, oh yes, I feel so much better. But then 2 weeks of pain. So would you rather have instant relief and 2 weeks of pain, or would you rather have 5 seconds of pain and then 2 weeks of freedom? And we all suffer this quick mentality. Like, I'll just, you know what? Forget it. I'll just have cookies for dinner. Like a lot of times I'll talk to guys about, hey, you got a protein, stack protein, all this kind of stuff. They're like, bro, I'm sorry, but if I'm going to die on a hill, I'm going to die on a hill of Doritos. Right. And I'm like, bro, I've been on that hill. I still got my pop-up tent on that hill.
You live on that hill.
I used to, right?
Yeah.
And this is the number one thing I want you to just understand. There's no psychological disorder for you not opening your mouth or speaking up.
I mean, I know some people will probably be like,
conditioning.
Yeah, but some people are probably disappointed by that. Like, oh man, I wish you could tell me I had something, because sometimes we want a diagnosis because then we can, paints us a picture of how to get out of it, how to overcome it. But at the end of the day, that's probably the best answer possible, is that there's nothing actually wrong with me. I just got to do it. Like that's an easier thing to handle. It's just like, hey, just do it more than like you actually have some deep wound or something.
Yes. Correct.
All right.
All right. So then the how to or what to, right? So we got three things I want you to start practicing, things that I want you to do. And the concept is, the number one thing is that there's a speaking continuum. And I want you just to think about this for a second, like a continuum, like, the lengthwise. So you've got low, moderate, high, and low risk speaking up would be anywhere somebody sharing an idea, a brainstorming, a mastermind, talking to your boss, speaking up to your husband, speaking to your kids. The low risk is ask a question, is just, share an idea. So you're literally just going to be like, hey, wait, I didn't know that you were going out tonight. Okay. Or you just basically share your idea, like, wait, well, I thought we would go to the movies. Or with work, I thought this was going to be a team effort. Right. Or I thought Tal and I were going to take the lead. I didn't know you were taking the lead. Okay. So you're really just sharing an idea. And it's just that superficial, low level. I'm just going to put an idea out there. And most of the time, when there's a popular idea, a lot of times the way people say it brings dissension. Like, hey, is there anybody who has a dissent? Anybody who has got a contrary point, or anyone want to contradict Tyler? Instead of just saying, hey, any more ideas?
Right.
Okay. So that way I don't have to say something by combating Tyler. I just have to say something.
Right.
Okay. So the lowest level of risk for you personally to learn, how did I take that test? How did I pass that test? What's my examination? The examination is to share an idea. You raise your hand, you get called on. I have a quick idea. It is this. And you let
Have
it go.
we thought about any of that stuff?
Yes. Have you thought about, hey, my idea would be this. What if we combine these two? Just a simple share. Okay. And that's the lowest level. Number two, personally, this is where I jump. This is a moderate level of risk, where moderate level of risk means you might get attacked. Somebody might say something mean to you. And that's questioning another person's idea, and then I call that playing dumb. That's my number one way to jump into a kind of a heated conversation or a difficult situation. So like, okay, a husband and wife fighting in the office, and it's couple therapy. Okay. Or I'm coaching a CEO, and we're talking to, some colleagues, and I have to jump in between them. The number one thing I do is I'll say, wait a minute, excuse me, like, maybe I missed it. Maybe I missed something. Can you clarify that? Like, I'm confused. And then they go back and say it again. And then I'm saying, okay, so what you're trying to say is this. And I kind of pick it apart, but literally asking questions. Like, it's kind of confusing, to be honest. So I'm doing it that way. Okay. At the same time, I'm showing whomever I'm helping or whomever I'm working with to, like, it's okay to ask questions, and it's okay to get my answers. It's not rude. It's actually rude to you not to say anything. Okay. Remember, this is a university.
Right. To walk away confused.
So this is the university of me. If I have to take the test, I at least need to know what I'm taking. If I have to examine myself and say, hey, I give myself a C+, then I have to know how I'm grading myself.
Right.
And so to me, the easiest idea is to, hey, can you explain that a little bit more? Like, hey, I'm confused. Maybe I missed some data. Can you clarify for me? Right.
Yeah. I always partner it, like, especially not if I'm like mediating, but if I'm in a meeting, I'll say, like, maybe we went over this, but I didn't hear it, or I zoned out or something. And then I bring up a point, because I'm not lying. There's a lot of times I space out. And so it's like, it gives me the opportunity to not say, like, no one's covered this, but it's like, maybe I missed this, and sometimes they're like, oh no, we already talked about that. Or remember last week, or remember that email that got sent out. And so it's an easier way to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's good.
Third
and then
one?
the third one is the highest risk, and you're most likely going to get challenged because you're going to challenge. And so this is called a direct challenge to another person's ideas or decisions by just raising your hand and saying, how many times have you tried this before? Do you have any data on the success of this plan? Like, have you deployed this plan before, and was it successful? And they're going to feel personally attacked, but maybe you are attacking that person. Maybe you just got beef. Or maybe you're just still saying, hey, I know my personal team, my 6 people that I kind of mentor, I know they're not going to like this. So now I'm sticking my neck out for them. So a lot of times, if it's for people, I'm more likely to go that high risk because I want to help my team.
Sure.
If it's just for me, people are less likely to make that personal challenge because people obviously will see it's a personal attack or a challenge. but do it. And the whole reason I have this hat on, obviously I love Jesus, but Jesus in his day, I want you to think about how he did things. When he was confronted about the tax collection, is it lawful to pay your taxes? And he basically says, hey, do you got a quarter? Like, whose face is on it? Like, then give to Caesar what belongs to him. Like he answered questions with a question, right? And then he also challenged the status quo. Like, okay, so if you're going to stone this lady, then I want to see the man who has no sin cast the first stone.
Right.
Like, he just challenged the thoughts of the day by not breaking the traditions of God.
Well, and he led people to find the answer.
Yes, correct.
He could have just said, none of you are perfect, so you can't throw the first stone.
Right.
Instead, he made them think and come to their own conclusion, which he knew that they were going to come to. And then you got ownership now on that decision.
Correct. So I would, and when I tell people this, I say, I wouldn't have said I take the moderate risk line, but I say this, like, I follow Jesus and that I play dumb. Like, Jesus knows the answer, but he plays dumb. Like, well, would you say this? Well,
Right.
whose face is on the money? Right. And so I like that because he doesn't really come right directly in their face.
Sure.
But I mean, I think it's savage because, like, he answers a question with the question that makes them question themselves and realize they're wrong.
Yeah.
Right. So I want you to think about that. Like, and then the other part is, it's funny. I think about these things. I don't know why, but I told Stacy, like, I think I'm gonna wear this camo hat. Because Jesus, how he challenged people of the day. And then also I could tell people not to hide. Stop hiding behind your camouflage. Like, stop hiding in the bushes. Stop being camoed.
Yep.
Like, step out. Stacy just laughs.
Any chance you can wear your camo?
Yeah. Any chance. That's great.
Any chance. Two things I wrote down. I try to take pride in being able to bring up difficult situations and do it well. I think that's a really good sign of a good leader, is someone that can have difficult conversations with people, whether you agree with them or not, and be able to both leave the conversation and feeling good about that. And I've really tried to do some research on that and follow some people. And so here's what I do if I'm in a meeting and let's say a lot of those times they're group meetings or even one-on-one. I always start off by saying something I really liked that just happened. So, like, oh, Dad, I really like that idea of, the hat that you have. And then, if we're talking about merch, oh, I really like the idea of doing sweatshirts, but can I play devil's advocate for a moment? And that one line, can I play devil's advocate? Or I say, can I be negative Nancy for a second? Or, can I say what maybe some super negative person outside of this room is going to say? Because I'd rather have it tore up in here than go through the whole process of creating the merch and someone say something that we thought, or, if we're planning an event or all that stuff. So those are two things I do. I always say the first thing I like, oh man, I love that idea of having it on an event on a Saturday. But could I be negative Nancy for a moment? And then it's not like, Dad, your idea is stupid, or that's never going to work. I like slide into, like, I pull away from Tyler and now I'm playing this fictional quote character that is going to bring up something super negative, but it allows me, and I think it kind of breaks down everyone. It's not me versus Dad. It's just this thought of someone that could be hyper negative, to bring it to. And then I say the thing that I've been thinking, let me be negative Nancy for a moment. I don't think pink sweatshirts are going to sell.
Yeah. That's
so
good. Very good.
The two things I try to do. And last, is that all you got? Cause I got a takeaway. And then I don't know.
No, there's two more.
All right, go ahead.
Two more. So number one is speak up on that continuum of low, moderate, high risk. Okay. Number two is I need you to role play. And we talked already about the RAS system, which is the reticular activation system. That's the part of the brain that helps you see sequential visual memories. So we call them scripting. So like if you said to a kid, hey, what happens when you go to a birthday party? They would kind of look up and kind of shake their head and kind of think through things. And they would tell you, you eat cake, you open presents. Like for our girls, it'd be like, you hit a piñata and get candy. Okay. So scripting is like first, second, third, fourth, fifth, what happens in that scenario. So our RAS system has that outlined for us. Like, I'm going to speak up and then the negative ant comes in and I'm going to get roasted. So it shuts down. So once you kind of know what you want to do. So I want to do low risk. So I want to step in and just share an idea. Like, so after Tyler talks about pink merch and I just raise my hand and I'm like, can we also do another color? I like black personally. Can we do black with pink? I'm not saying mix the colors, but can we have 2 options?
Yep.
Okay.
Have we thought of?
So once I know that's the line I want to take, so now I'm going to spend, let's just say 5 minutes a day, especially leading up to, like, if I know I have a meeting I have to present, maybe 5 to 7 minutes a day for 5 days leading up to it. I'm going to sit down, I'm going to breathe, I'm going to relax, and I'm going to see myself stand up, and I'm going to play out that scenario of me saying all these pieces. Ed, let's say, or negative Nancy, whoever, who I know is going to just be contrary because that's what he or she does. Then I'm going to say, okay, I'm just going to talk about, okay, if he says this, I'm going to play that next question. If he does this, then I'm going to do that, like the when-then scenarios. When Nancy says this, then I'm going to say that. And you play out those scenarios. It doesn't mean it's going to go out that way. It means I've just taken away the power of the uncertainty because I have now 7 lines that I probably could go down if I had to. Yep. Okay. So that's the RAS system. Now, the cool thing about this is with athletes and speakers, when they do the visual training, the RAS, when you enter in like that and you really feel it and believe it, there's zero difference between your fantasy or my visual training and the reality. The brain knows no different. It only knows different because my body reacts differently when it's physical or it's just fake. Okay. But when I'm making myself walk through it and I'm seeing it, all the neurons, right, believe like I just did that. And that's where the visual training actually saves a lot of emotional time of you wrecking yourself or failing, right? Yeah. And the idea is I want you to go, whether the end result is pass or fail isn't so much of my issue. All the data for me is in the process. How did you feel when you walked up there? How did you do? How did you deliver? You know, hey, did you have dry mouth? Were you pitting out? Like what? And you just go through all those scenarios. Like Tyler and I do that to each other. You know, we watch our films back and forth and, hey, how did I do? Hey, what'd you see? You know, we jokingly say, okay, cool, but tell me where I sucked or what did you see I need to improve? Because that's where the money's at. Okay. So your examination isn't so much like, did I get a standing ovation? Your examination is how did I do in the process of preparing, visually training, and then showing up. And so once you're in that meeting or the next time your husband confronts you and you say something, you're going to be like, to be honest, and this is what I always hear. I always hear this. People say, to be honest, I thought it'd be way worse. And then they say this, I should have done this stuff sooner. How come I didn't meet you 2 years ago?
Yep.
Right. And I've never had somebody say, hey, I'm doing everything you say and it still sucks. So I want my money back, or like, hey, I'm done.
Right.
Okay.
Well, we usually create the worst case scenario in our head.
Yes. Yes. And if you just by playing, I promise you, if you just do this like 3 minutes a day, 2 minutes a day, just getting yourself to speak up at any meeting you have on don't close your eyes, but on your way driving to work. Like I used to travel to Cherokee, which is like an hour away from here, maybe an hour and 10 minutes, depending on traffic or whatever. And if I knew I had like a mediation back then, I was still doing court evaluations and I knew I was going to have like maybe a deposition from an attorney. I would literally the whole way up there, I'd play some jazz music, kind of get myself in a relaxed mood. And I would have this dude drill me because I just knew like this guy doesn't like me. And you know, and you could just say, well, he's getting paid not to. Okay, cool. But I think there's a difference between somebody who just, you know, wants to win and people who just like, don't like me. Like I could just tell, you know, like this dude wants to go a few rounds. He ain't gonna last one, but you know, that's the kind of concept. So I would practice ahead of the time for 2 reasons. One, I wanted to prepare. And 2, I think it's funny as crap if I can stay completely chill and I have attorneys freak out in the courtroom. Dude, like that's better than scoring a touchdown. Like I get so jacked. And then the attorney who hires me says, I don't know how you did it, bro, but I've never seen somebody get under that dude's skin like that.
Unfazed.
Okay. Yeah. And that's 100% because of practice. Like not because I'm, you know, just a genius or something like that.
I mean, the weird thing is like communication, confrontation, having hard conversations, even public speaking. Yeah. We sometimes just think that stuff is gifted. And there is an element of just natural ability to feel comfortable to do that. But like, so I've had even people tell me that to me, like, oh man, it must be nice just to be able to, you know, be gifted, the gift of communication. That's not true. Like Alicia is watching. My first sermons were horrible.
I was there. We were in Springfield. That bro soaked through 3 shirts. He soaked through a sweat towel. Sweat was dripping off his face.
I was dry heaving. I had vomit not here in the back. I was re-swallowing my vomit. Like
you had that white spit like just bouncing off your lip over here just because you're so dry.
I popped 2 fever blisters on the top lip and the bottom lip the night before. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't, it's just not natural. And we understand that in every other area besides some of these things, you
Yeah.
know, even the art of having tough conversations and bringing that just doesn't happen. Like people
Mm-mm.
train and try. Before I preach a message, I run over it verbatim with hand gestures. I hold my pen as my mic. Like I go over those things like for a
Yes.
Sunday message, probably
Yes.
7 or 8 times.
Correct.
So it's not like, oh man, you just write some things down and get up there and keep. No, I'm intentional on when I pause, when I
Yes.
breathe, when I just stare at my notes. Like I don't understand why we don't
Yeah.
understand that with anything else. There's people that I've communicated with that are phenomenal at confrontation.
Yeah.
That I've gotten trouble, or they wanted to bring something up that I did, and I left the conversation feeling better about myself, and they
Yeah.
just corrected me. I'm like,
Right.
man, that's how I want to operate. So then I figure out how they did that.
Correct.
It's
All
got to be
right. So
learned
so
and
here
practiced.
I'll throw this at you. So what if I'm listening? I'm a guest tonight and I'm listening, and they hear you and they believe you. Like, okay, you sucked at first, but now you're great. But that's easy. You have a presentation, so you're going through steps and slides, and you get to practice. I don't know how someone's going to confront me if I present data in a meeting, or if I present something like a proposal to my boss in a meeting of 10 people. That's not the same. What would you say to them?
I would say speak up to the areas and know what you're communicating. So if you start asking me about why my grass is horrible, I'm freaking out. I don't know how to answer that. I start babbling. I don't know what to say. If I'm doing a presentation on something that I'm passionate about, speaking to the youth, teaching to the next generation, church ministry, local church stuff, that's easy for me because I know it. So sometimes we don't want to speak up because we haven't done the grunt work to do some research on the area or the topic we're coming into. Before every meeting, I spend some time jotting down some notes going into a brainstorming. I don't show up to a brainstorming meeting and just go, "Oh, I hope I have a random idea now." I've been thinking about it since I got the invite. I've
Right.
been thinking about that. If we got a merch meeting, I've been looking up stuff. I've been Googling it. I've been on different Instagram pages. Like sometimes we don't do the prep work, and then we come into the conversation and we're not scared we're scared the questions we're going to get asked because we don't have enough data. We haven't
Yeah.
done the research. Put in some prep work before some meetings,
Yeah.
or a conversation with your spouse. Do some of that stuff. Think about some of the options, some of the other ways. Have a plan A, B, and C.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the concept is like, okay, look at the agenda, know that you have a meeting coming up, circle and star some of the issues that you might feel a little bit of like friction already. Just like, man, if Ed says this, or if Sarah comes at me, you already can kind of prepare. So yes, Tyler does have an advantage if he's given a speech and he knows his bullet points and he knows his slides. You're at a disadvantage because you might not know a question coming at you, but the issue remains the same. You still got to put in the time. You still got to put in the time. You still have to put in the time.
And
And
the other
that
thing
time is
is,
visual training, visual training, visual training.
if we're talking about math curriculum, I'm not going to raise my hand and be like, "Oh, hey, here's something I've been thinking." Yeah,
Right.
I don't need to chime into that situation. That
Correct.
has zero information. Some people just like, no, I want to, have you thought about, it's like that has nothing to do with me. That's not my expertise. That's not my area or my field. It's like some of
Yeah.
us, at the same token, you don't need to chime into every single thing possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Correct. All right. Well, third point. So number one, we got our speaking continuum, low, moderate, high risk to confront. Right. Number two, once I know where I want to jump in, I have to visually practice that. Okay. And number three, this is the best one. It's create common language. And I work on that so hard with families. Like when a kid tantrums, what are we going to call it? We spent a lot of time, I'm not picking on Terrence, but he had a lot of anxiety. And if you pushed him into his uncertainty, he literally would freak out, start flopping himself on the floor and stuff like that. Like he had a lot of anxiety as a toddler, preschooler. And so one time we videotaped him and I put it down on a tape and we had to broadcast it, plug it into the TV, and we watched it. And I said, "Hey, what do you call this?" And he's like, "I don't know, Dad." I was like, "What do you call this?" "I don't know." I was like, "Well, he's not talking." And we just talked third person. "This kid here, what's he doing?" "I don't know, Dad." He started getting frustrated. Well, I mean, okay, he's just yelling. He's yelling at the air. So like, I'm going to say, okay, so when this kid yells at the air, he gets a timeout. He's like, he's not yelling. Okay, what's he doing? And then he started rocking and he goes, "He's spazzing, Dad. He's spazzing. Okay. He's just spazzing." So we used the language spazzing for 2 or 3, 4 years, however long it took him to get out of those, which is just the ball of anxiety, just like, rah, like trying to get him to talk about something hard. And he's just freaking out. So now we had shared language and I would say, "How'd your day go? How'd you treat Mom?" And I would like, hey, did a spaz show up? Third person again, not you. Like it did it. Like, in other words, did you get a cold? Did it, did a cold come on you? And just putting that common language out there allowed him to talk about it. He was like, Dad, I felt like I was going to spaz, but I just started running. What did running do? I don't know. It made the spaz go away. Awesome, buddy. Just high five him. And this is what I want you to understand. Like the common language in our house, we joke about it. We laugh about it. Tavian had a buddy that came up and they were playing a pickleball tournament and messing around. And my kids roast me. And I don't even know they're roasting me or whatever. But anyways, they devised an idea to, this guy asked me a question about like workouts. And I went into like, 7-minute talk about research in the brain. And so I was just talking about neurological stacking, like the ability to have a heavier load, right? So you can carry more load because of a constellation of effort, economy of effort with your mind and body. Like 7 moves turns into 1 move. So I gave him that little thing. And I was like, and then once you kind of know what you're doing, bro, you just stack days. So Tavian just told me that he texts Tave a lot and says, bro, I got to work out. I got to stack these days. And bro, I got to go study. I got to stack these days. And even though they're both joking and they pick on me, I changed their language.
Change their life.
They have common language. And so, okay, jokingly, when we're all talking as a family, we'll be at dinner. Todd's like, oh, this epic thing happened where I had to renew my mind. And then everybody looks at each other and he's like, and then I climbed toward uncertainty. And then I had to, and he just gives us all the language, and he's like, and then I had to become a congruent man. And then I got down, but I bounced one more time because I'm resilient. And, there's 2 times to be great. And it just gives
the
all
dad
our
phrases.
And we all start laughing. And to be honest, it's a little embarrassing. Like, okay, bro, chill. That's enough. But our family is who we are because we changed our culture through our language, right? Yes, we still fight. Yes, we still argue. Yes, we still have difficult days. Yes, it's still like, man, I don't know how to bring up this conversation with Tyler. Like if not Alicia, if Stella and Valencia are fighting, like that's a hard conversation for both of us because we both love on both sides, but we still have to enter into that gap and start just saying, hey, how are we going to fix this? Those are the difficult conversations. Now, listen, there's 3 pieces of data that happen when you can unify language, right? Common language. Number 1, you have faster communication. You don't wait 14 days to ponder that. You jump in. Number 2, you get better decisions because there's more people looking at the same problem. And that's what I want you to understand. Think about this as a family. If 72% of your family doesn't jump in, there's only 1 or 2 people like making decisions, maybe 1. Okay. Now, as all the people who don't have a voice start to grow their voice, think about how better your communications can be, how better your decisions can be. Just level up on every single way, every single angle. And then the last one is you have the unified culture. So one person can say, bro, I can't show up. I got to stack some days. We all know that guy is going to be building something, right?
Yep.
He can be working on a talk. He could be, working on weights. He could be writing a proposal for, med school or whatever it is. Like that language, jokingly, even though we mess around with it, it stabilizes everybody because it's a common shared language to attack problems. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah. Very cool. Okay. So then at the end, I want you to think about this. Like there are 3 things that I want you to think through, right? Number 1, like your call to action, or what I need you to do. Number 1, I need you to identify who is psychologically safe for you. So is that a best friend? Is that your husband? Is that your spouse? Is that a mom? Is that a mother-in-law? Is that a boss? Is that a mentor? Who can you go to and say, hey, I know you're busy, but I just need to vent for about 5 or 7 minutes and just listen for a second. And then I need you to tell me where my blind spot is. I need you to tell me if I'm wrong. Like I can take it. I know you love me. Tell me if I'm wrong. Here it goes. And then you just dump it. The psychological safety is I can be me. Okay. I can be me. So the university of me is you're worth it. Speak up, share, and confront if you have to. Because at the end of the day, if you don't share you, then what was the purpose of God giving you your 10 fingerprints that are unique to the 7.9 billion people on this earth? How are we going to know what cog in a wheel you're supposed to stand in the gap? How do we know what your call is if you don't share? And that's where I see so many people hurting is like they don't step up, they don't share, and they don't develop that really, really deep conversation with somebody, that psychological safety.
Yeah,
now,
they can't
obviously,
voice their own opinion.
They can't voice their own opinion. Now, obviously, if you're married, in my opinion, the best person would be your spouse. But if you're not there yet, use a BFF, use a psychologist, use a pastor, use a mentor, whoever. So step 1, identify your psychological safe person and jump in. I'm serious. Jump in every single week. Every single week, touch base. Once a week, touch base. Number 2, once you kind of know where your blind spot is, either because you have identified it or your psychological safe person said, hey, I think you missed something here. Okay, now practice that part. Practice it with the RAS system, the reticular activation system. That's your visual training. Okay. And then your last thing is, I want you to jump in low risk. And this is fun to do also. So you call back your psychological safe person, say your next meeting, say, okay, I got to run a role play with you. And so you show up and you're like, okay, you're going to be Ed. And I want you to look at me mean. And I hear you just play the devil's advocate or play the negative Nancy or whatever you want to do. Right. Yeah. Okay. Play difficult Dave. And then you walk through it with them. And then at the end, you'll feel really, really good because your body says, hey, that's not uncertain anymore. So now here's what happens most of the time. Most of the time, because you're prepared, it doesn't show up. You're not afraid of it. So it doesn't show up. When you're afraid, it typically shows. And that's a weird thing. People ask me, how's that work? How's that work? People say, well, you manifest your thoughts and stuff like that. I think because you prepare your perception to see it, you see it. You prepare your mind like, hey, this is going to happen. So it shows up because
you already conquered it.
Yeah. And because you conquered it, like it doesn't show up typically. And if it did, it's not a big deal. And you're like, man, I way overthought that one. Yep. And that's the hope I want for you. So if you hang out with your psychological safe friend, you practice through your RAS system, your visual training, and then you go back and decide, I'm gonna role play out this low challenge, right? This low risk, and practice that habit, you will actually be developing you. That is your university of me. Those 3 steps, your call to action is going to help you grow.
Sure. Love it. I got one final thought, and it just comes to speaking up. Me and Alicia always say this. It's either offend someone or be offended. So you either possibly offend someone by saying, hey, Dad, I don't like that hat, or hey, when you said this, it didn't, I felt this type of way, or, I don't think that's a great idea, or whatever the situation is. You either offend someone, or like you said, you don't say anything in the moment and then you walk away and then you're offended or hurt. Yeah. You could replace that with hurt or whatever it is, but you walk away and going, oh man, I should have said, or why didn't I say, or when they spoke up and made me feel I could have rebutted with, or I should have thought of. And like you said, they think about that for 2 weeks. So it's like, man, offend in the moment and be able to work it out and contemplate it. Because the other thing is I walk away and for 2 weeks, I feel some type of way towards you. It's not only I'm mad about myself, man, I should have said, but now I didn't get to voice my opinion to you. So now I'm like, well, he probably thinks and he should, it's like now I'm just 2 weeks of offended. And it's like, man, if I could have just possibly maybe offended in the moment. So I mean, at least I always say that either offend or be offended. Someone's going to have one of those moments, and all difficult conversations where you're just like, it's not easy or doesn't feel good, but either offend or be offended.
Yeah. And I'll finish with this one. Listen, I years ago, I was mentoring a man, and Christian guy, we're using the Bible, and he just kept having a lot of excuses and blaming people and just kind of just not quite seeing it. And finally he asked me, he was like, hey, what do you do about people when they do this to you? Basically, I saw him blaming people, and I said, hey, time out. I said, how long have you been speaking this way? And he answered me, and I said, this is the issue. And he goes, what do you mean? And I basically just cut to the chase, and this would be a high challenge. I came right at him and I said, I don't think this is what you should be doing. And I think this is a reaction to the way you speak, and just give him some information, played a role play back with him. Like, hey, remember this conversation. And he literally sat there, and we're, at Panera Bread drinking coffee, because we meet at like 6 a.m. This is years ago. And he literally started crying, and he looked at me and he said, nobody have had the guts to say that to me, but I know that he's like, I know that's true. And I said, how do you know that's true? And he said, because I can tell like that offends people. And basically he has anxieties. So he'd puff up and act like he, like he didn't. And basically we call that armoring up. So he has his armor on, and I confronted him.
Yeah.
And he cried. A grown man cried. And then we hugged and stuff. And then since then we call each other shield bearers, because we broke through that level of where I can just pin him with something to say, and then he can pin me too. And nowadays we look back and we laugh at that, but that's what's made us best friends, is because I can push through that pain with him and say those things, and he can say them back to me. And so I'm just telling you, what if the thing that you feel like you need to say and you don't, what if that's the one thing God wants you to do to set that person free?
Yeah.
That's truth.
Step into a better relationship.
Yes.
Sweet.
All right. Really good.
We're getting out of here. Never forget it. there's 2 times to be great: when you feel like it and when you don't.
Yes, sir.
And
2 times.
On this podcast, we teach you how to renew your perspective, move towards uncertainty, and find what's awesome about that in every situation. We love you. Peace out.
Amen. Peace.
I had to realize what's inside of me. For all of the people that lied to me, for all of the people that said I would fall off. Oh, boy, what a time to be alive. I wrote this for everyone, feel like they counted out. You need to look in the mirror and tell yourself it's time to be who I am now. Greatness.